Welcome to the Debunkers Podcast. Today we're pulling back the curtain on something you probably interact with, well, pretty often. Think about the person who just delivered your food, maybe, or the driver who picked you up last weekend. The gig economy. It gets advertised as this world of, flexibility, empowerment. That's the promise, right? But the sources we've gathered for this deep dive, they paint let's say, a much more complex picture. One that's often really deeply linked to financial precarity and real struggle for a lot of people.
That's exactly right. And our mission today really is to dive into these articles, this research, and pull out the key insights. We want to understand what the gig economy truly means, not just for the workers caught up in it, but for the companies driving it, and honestly for all of us, for society. So yeah, let's get into the material.
Okay, so first things first. When we say gig work, is this actually a brand new thing, something that just popped up with smartphones? Or is it maybe just, an older way of working that technology has kind of amplified?
That's a great place to start, because the sources, they really highlight there isn't one single definition everyone agrees on for gig work or the gig economy. Some experts, they define it pretty narrowly. They focus on earning money specifically from online platforms, ride-hailing, online tasks, cleaning services, that kind of thing.
Or the app stuff that pops into your head immediately.
Exactly. But then others, they use gig much more broadly. It covers all sorts of non-traditional work. You hear terms like contingent labor, temp labor, or even the precariat, stressing how precarious, how insecure the work often is.
Okay.
So for our deep dive today, we're casting a bit of a wider net. We're definitely including those app-based workers who, and this is important, are often misclassified as independent contractors. We'll get into that. Yeah. But we're also looking at temp workers. They're usually seen as contractors to the companies they temp for, right? And even franchise workers, where their ability to, say, organize is often undermined by the structure.
Interesting. So it's broader than just Uber and DoorDash.
Much broader. And here's a really crucial insight from the sources. This idea of precarious employment. It's not just gig work. You find it right across the economy. And honestly, it's, as one source puts it, as old as capitalism. It tends to benefit employers.
Okay, right. So not a new beast, just maybe new clothes.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's exploded recently.
Yeah.
What do the numbers tell us? And who exactly is doing this work? Who makes up this growing workforce?
Yeah, the growth is pretty staggering, actually. If you look at app-based workers, specifically in the U.S., their numbers tripled between 2017 and 2021. In 2021, you had 5 million taxpayers reporting income from these online platforms.
5 million? Wow.
And more broadly, looking at 2024 figures, 13% of people said they made money selling things online or in person, and 9% made money doing short-term tasks like rides or deliveries. And if you look at freelancers overall, estimates were around 73.3 million in 2023 and projected to hit 76.4 million in 2024.
Those are enormous numbers.
Yeah.
Just huge. What about demographics? Who are these workers?
Well, demographically, younger adults are more likely to be involved. Specifically, 26% of those aged 18 to 29. Hispanic adults also show higher rates, around 24%. And the sources are pretty clear that app-based workers, specifically, are disproportionately people of color.
Yeah.
We also see higher rates among parents with younger kids, that's 26%, and students at 30%, which suggests, that maybe the flexibility aspect does appeal to people juggling other big life commitments.
Right, that makes sense.
And the pandemic is interesting, too. Gig work definitely surged during COVID. But what's fascinating is only 4% of gig workers said COVID actually sped up their move into independent work. A bigger group, 13%, actually pointed to having a pandemic-ready work life already in place as a plus. So for many, it was more about continuity than a sudden shift.
Interesting. So, okay, we see how big this is, who's involved. But underneath all this, there's that fundamental issue, the one that really shapes everything for these workers. Why are companies so set on classifying them as independent contractors, not employees? Is it just money? Or do the companies argue there are benefits for the workers too, beyond just flexibility?
That really is the core question, isn't it? And the sources we looked at, they are remarkably consistent on this point. Companies classify workers as independent contractors primarily, and the sources use phrases like this to maximize profits and cut labor costs.
Okay, so money.
It seems to be the main driver. The financial motivations are significant. See, contractors, they just don't get the same benefits and protections as traditional employees, W-2 workers. We're talking employer-sponsored health care, Social Security contributions from the employer, unemployment insurance, workers' comp.
Right. Paid leave, sick days.
Exactly. Paid sick or family leave, crucial anti-discrimination protections, and, this is huge, the right to organize and bargain collectively. All that goes away with contractor status.
So it's basically shifting all those employer costs and responsibilities onto the worker.
That's the bottom line, yeah. These big digital platform companies, Uber, Lyft, Instacart, our sources say they've relentlessly mounted federal, state, and local campaigns to erode worker rights. Their goal seems to be creating permanent legal carve-outs, exceptions basically, that let them keep denying workers employee benefits and even minimum wage guarantees.
Wow, relentless.
Yeah. One source put it very bluntly, it's just easier for businesses to use freelancers. They can hire and fire them as they please. They don't have to worry about healthcare, retirement, unemployment, workers' comp, paid time off, all those responsibilities that come with having actual employees. The sources really frame this as a corporate strategy. There's not much talk from the company side in these materials about worker benefits beyond that initial hook of flexibility.
Okay, so we've got the scale, the who, the why from the company perspective, but let's talk about the human side. What do the sources say about the actual day-to-day reality? You used the word precarious before. Are these jobs really, designed to be insecure?
They really seem to be, based on this research. The sources paint a pretty stark picture of the challenges. They make these jobs precarious almost by definition. Let's start with money. Financial insecurity. It's huge. One report literally says gig work traps workers in a precarious existence with significant financial insecurity.
Traps them.
Yeah. I mean, look at DoorDash drivers. They report really low pay.
Yeah.
Sometimes 2 deliveries, maybe involving 4 stops total, might only pay $12, $15. And that doesn't even account for their gas, parking, car maintenance.
Right, all the expenses they have to cover themselves.
Exactly. And for rideshare drivers like Uber, they've reported that the percentage the company takes from each fare has actually increased over time. It used to be maybe 25-40% going to the driver. Now it's often less. One source cites Uber's full commission rate is actually 33.2% of the passenger fare, much higher than the 25% figure often floated.
So the driver's slice of the pie is shrinking.
Seems that way. And the impact is broad. A survey found 14% of gig workers earned less than the federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. Compare that to 0% of traditional W-2 service workers, and over a quarter, 29%, earn less than their state's minimum wage.
Wow, less than minimum wage.
But it's not just the low amount, it's the volatility, the inconsistency. Half of all gig workers, and it jumps to 61% for those doing app-based tasks, wish their pay was more consistent. And this unpredictability, our sources show, it leads to more financial stress, less life satisfaction, and worse financial decisions.
Worse decisions? How so?
Well, there were these experimental studies mentioned. They simulated volatile income for participants, and those people were more likely to choose, say, $15 right now, rather than wait 2 weeks for a slightly higher payout of $17. It shows how that constant income instability can kind of rewire your thinking, forcing you into short-term survival mode instead of planning long-term. That's a really critical human cost, often overlooked.
That's a powerful example. Just struggling to make ends meet day to day. What about those safety nets? Benefits? Things traditional employees often rely on. Are they just gone?
Pretty much, yeah. As contractors, they're not entitled to standard employment benefits. No health insurance, paid leave, retirement plans funded by the employer. This creates what one source calls a severe insurance gap.
Severe gap.
Yeah. The data shows 28% of gig workers wish they had health insurance. That number jumps to 42% for those doing short-term app work. And overall, gig workers just have lower health insurance coverage rates, 88% versus 92% for other adults.
And nearly 1 in 7 without any coverage.
Right. And think back to the pandemic. DoorDash workers, according to some reports, got little to no safety support. Some said they were reimbursed maybe 80 cents a day for cleaning supplies. 80 cents. Uber drivers faced what was described as a heartbreaking choice: starvation or sickness.
God, that's grim. What about longer term, like retirement?
That's another major area of concern. Many gig workers feel sorely underprepared for their work life to come to an end. Get this. 30% said they never expect to retire, and 45% don't expect to retire before 65. A huge majority, 67%, explicitly stated that not having access to retirement plans and other traditional benefits was a major drawback of the work.
67%. That's a massive number, saying benefits are a big miss.
It really is. And the impact on basic needs is clear, too. 30% of gig workers reported using SNAP food stamps within a month of one survey. That's double the rate of traditional W-2 service workers.
Double the rate on food stamps.
Yeah.
Okay. So beyond the money and the lack of benefits, what about just the actual working conditions, the day-to-day grind, and the mental toll?
Yeah, the human impact there is substantial, too. Our sources reveal 50% of app-based workers reported feeling overworked and physically exhausted. And 56% said that the employer tracking, the apps monitoring everything actually worsens their mental health. They're 13% more likely to feel exhausted than workers who aren't tracked by apps.
That constant monitoring must be stressful.
Absolutely. And for delivery drivers, like DoorDash, their whole livelihood is ruled by customer ratings. If your rating dips too low, you can be automatically moved to the back of the line for deliveries. Less work, less pay, or even worse, deactivated immediately and without recourse, just cut off, often with no real way to appeal.
Deactivated without recourse. That sounds terrifying.
It leads to what the sources call a loss of dignity at work. On top of that, many gig workers feel isolated. 29% reported feeling that way, and there's a real lack of confidence in long-term stability. 44% weren't confident they could support their family if they suddenly couldn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense given the volatility.
And then there are the on-the-ground challenges. Drivers face crime in some areas. Some sources mention what they call a Karen element, basically dealing with difficult or sometimes discriminatory customers, particularly for people of color. And just the weather, extreme heat, freezing cold, that's a constant battle when your car is your office.
Right. Plus, you mentioned career progression earlier.
Yeah, that's another struggle, the inability to progress in a career or train to leave it. Often there just aren't the funds or the time for professional development, for upskilling, when you're focused on making ends meet week to week.
Okay, so it's a pretty tough picture. Financial insecurity, lack of benefits, difficult conditions, mental strain, little career path. What does this all mean then? Given these deep systemic problems, what's being done? What strategies are actually emerging to maybe create good jobs here, to build a more sustainable, maybe more equitable gig economy?
Well, the good news is there are strategies emerging. Our sources highlight several different approaches coming from different directions. First, there's a big push on policy and legal reform, a strong call for policymakers to actually center the voices and experiences of workers when they make decisions. That means prioritizing meetings with worker centers, labor unions, the people actually doing the work.
Listening to the workers themselves.
Exactly. There's also significant support mentioned for the U.S. Department of Labor's final independent contractor rule. The goal there is to make sure more workers, including those misclassified by apps, get access to basic protections. Federal minimum wage, overtime pay, maybe employer health insurance contributions, workers' comp, anti-discrimination laws.
Trying to level the playing field a bit.
Right. And federal regulations are also being proposed for things like those deactivation policies we talked about, implementing something like just cause termination, so you can't just be kicked off a platform for no reason or an unfair reason.
That seems crucial. What about holding the companies accountable, especially with those temp or franchise models you mentioned?
Yeah, that's where things like the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, come in. Protecting regulations like their joint employer rule is seen as really important. That rule helps make sure that the main company, not just the temp agency or the franchise owner, can be held responsible for labor rights violations. It prevents them from just washing their hands of it.
Got it. So closing loopholes.
Basically. And beyond that, there are broader calls to more aggressively crack down on corporate and monopoly power, and also to pass laws that increase data transparency on app-based platform companies, force them to be more open about how their algorithms work, how pay is actually calculated.
The mysterious algorithms.
Exactly. Specific policy ideas also include things like a minimum gig wage, not just the standard minimum wage, but one that actually accounts for the extra costs workers bear, like fuel and vehicle maintenance, and also adapting job retraining programs so they work better for people with flexible or non-traditional schedules.
Are we seeing any of this happen already?
Some places, yes. The New York City Council, for instance, has passed bills that expand minimum pay protections specifically to app-based grocery delivery workers. So targeted action. And at the federal level, there is the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. If passed, it would implement what's called an ABC test for employee status. It's a stricter three-part test that would make it much harder for companies to legally classify workers as independent contractors when they really function more like employees.
Okay, so that's a lot on the policy side, kind of top-down changes. What about from the ground up, workers organizing, or even different kinds of companies?
Absolutely critical. Worker-led initiatives are showing real power. That group in New York City, Los Deliveristas Unidos, they represent something like 65,000 app-based delivery workers. They've fought for and won 6 historic labor standards, including, believe it or not, the legal right to use the customer's bathroom.
Wow, that had to be legislated.
Apparently so. Also, limits on how far they can be sent for a delivery, much-needed transparency about tips, and the right to earn fair pay. They're even building deliverista hubs, physical spaces where workers can rest, charge phones, get out of the weather, basic infrastructure.
That's amazing grassroots work.
It really is. And organizing efforts also help workers just become aware of and access public benefits they might already be eligible for, but didn't know about. SNP, Medicaid, energy assistance programs like LIHEAP. Plus, we're seeing the rise of worker cooperatives, like the Drivers Co-op in New York, which is now expanding to Colorado. These are businesses owned by the workers themselves. They typically provide traditional W-2 employment with benefits as part of that worker ownership model. It's a fundamentally different approach.
A co-op model for rideshare. Interesting. So some companies are choosing a different path then, actually employing their drivers.
Yes, exactly. There are innovative business models emerging that directly challenge that dominant contractor model. Alto is one example mentioned in the sources. It's a rideshare company. They deliberately choose to employ their drivers as W-2 employees. And they offer, as they put it, robust, competitive, compelling, complete compensation. That includes health benefits, 401k matching, workers' comp, sick pay, directly addressing that benefits gap.
Okay, but what's the catch? Is it more expensive?
Well, the sources do note trade-offs. Alto's average fare is higher, about 1.5 times what competitors like Uber and Lyft charge. And they do require some predictability from drivers regarding shifts. It's not quite the log on whenever you want model, though there's still flexibility.
So higher price for the consumer, maybe a bit less absolute flexibility for the driver, but you get benefits and stability.
That seems to be the trade-off. But the CEO of Alto makes a really interesting argument. They say the dominant gig company model, the one that's lost billions and billions without turning a profit, is ultimately unsustainable. They believe traditional industries figured out how to manage workforces, provide benefits, and be profitable without, as they say, totally abandoning the structures that exist and the policy that does exist to support workers and to support consumers. It's a strong counter-argument.
That is a powerful point, suggesting maybe this contractor model isn't the only way or even the best way long term. Okay, so beyond these big system changes, policy, organizing, new business models, what about individual workers? What can they do right now to manage financially given all this volatility?
Yeah, the sources offer some very practical advice for workers themselves. Financial empowerment strategies. For managing that irregular income, disciplined budgeting is absolutely key, like maybe depositing all earnings into savings first, then transferring a fixed, predictable amount into your checking account each month to cover essentials.
Smoothing out the bumps.
Exactly. Prioritizing essential expenses, maybe using financial tracking apps, things like YNAB or Mint Mention, can really help visualize where the money's going. Workers should also actively look into health insurance options. The Affordable Care Act marketplace is one route. Or maybe getting onto a spouse's plan if possible. And utilizing retirement savings tools designed for the self-employed, like solo 401ks or SEP IRA.
Right, taking advantage of the tools that are available.
Definitely. And taxes are huge for freelancers. It's crucial to separate business and personal finances. Keep meticulous track of expenses for deductions, mileage, supplies, phone bills, etc. And really importantly, setting aside money throughout the year for those quarterly estimated tax payments so you don't get hit with a huge bill.
Yeah, taxes can be a nightmare if you're not prepared.
For sure. Financial institutions are also being encouraged to adapt, to create products that work better for people with volatile incomes. Things like flexible automated savings plans or better ways to assess creditworthiness when income isn't a steady paycheck. And there's a clear need for more financial literacy programs specifically for freelancers, maybe delivered through the platforms they already use.
Makes sense. And finally, there was one more angle in the solution section, right? Something about how society views freelancing itself.
Yes, exactly. A broader call to sort of formalize freelancing as a legitimate career path. The idea is that governments and labor institutions should officially recognize freelancing, maybe through some kind of identification or accreditation system. This could potentially grant access to certain services or protections that are usually tied to traditional employment.
Interesting. Like a formal status.
Yeah, and policies are needed to mandate timely payments from clients, penalties for paying late or not paying at all. Some suggest freelance platforms could even be required to implement escrow systems, holding client money until the work is approved to make sure freelancers actually get paid reliably. It's about moving beyond seeing it just as gig work and embracing freelancing as a structured, recognized way to earn a living with appropriate supports.
Right, wow, okay. We have definitely covered a lot of ground today. From trying to pin down what gig work even means, its huge growth, to the really profound impact it has on people's actual lives, and then exploring all these different solutions emerging from workers, from businesses, from policymakers.
Yeah, and I think the core tension really remains, doesn't it? How do you balance that desire for flexibility with the fundamental need for security? And it's so important to remember, as the sources emphasize, the challenges we see in the gig economy. They don't exist in isolation. They often mirror, and sometimes even worsen, these broader pre-existing issues in our labor market: systemic inequalities, income polarization. It's like that old problem of precarious labor, just, digitized and scaled up.
A really crucial point. So as we wrap up, maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider as you navigate this rapidly changing economy. What if the volatility, the insecurity that gig workers experience so acutely? What if it isn't just some niche problem over there? What if it's actually a bellwether, a sign of where the future of work might be headed for many more people? And if that's the case, how might our collective idea of what constitutes a good job need to evolve? How do we ensure stability and dignity for everyone, not just those lucky enough to be in traditional W-2 employment? Something to think about. But sadly, it seems we've run out of time for today.
Thank you so much for listening and for being such an engaged part of our podcast.
We always value your participation.
Until our next deep dive together.
Goodbye for now, and we'll see you next time.